Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. It is Democracy 101 right here on the Podcast Party, and I have the distinct pleasure of being joined by two rather interesting young men who have decided to take it upon themselves to put their, name and, well, at least put their money where their mouth is and bring about some change in this country. And I am very, very, very grateful for you guys taking the time to sit down and having a chat with me. I am joined by two very distinguished young men, I should put it that way. Chris Papas, as well as Mr. Sandile Mnikathi. How are you guys doing?
Great, thank you for having us here today. It's nice to be in Johannesburg.
Yeah, it took a while for us to get this thing going, but I hope it'll come together.
No worries.
Not only do you have problems with your government here, but technology as well has
yeah,
issues.
it happens every now and again. So, gents, the two of you are a mayor and a deputy mayor in KZN. And not only did you run for that position, you got yourself a seat in government, but then you went on to decide to write a book about what went into some of the decisions that you made. Why was it not enough to just do your job? Why did you guys feel the need to write this book?
Okay. Sure. So I think it's, we live in a time where people living in despair and there's a sense of hopelessness. And we hope that the book, gives back a sense of hope. So that's really what the book is about.
Yeah.
We don't claim to be local government experts, but we hope that our story inspires people, and to say that there's where there's political will, things can be done differently.
Yeah.
So I think that's really the crux of it. There's nothing. Yeah.
I think also maybe is that many people don't understand how local government in particular works. How do your roads get fixed? Does the water come into your taps? There's a whole system behind getting there. It's not quite as simple as turning on the tap or driving out your driveway.
Right.
And to share a bit of an insight on how things work, the mechanisms behind it, but also how when, in an environment where seemingly you're always moving backward and there's always regression, we're always quite negative in South Africa, that you can make positive steps. You can actually go forward.
Right.
And I think that was it, to capture the steps that we took and our team took to be able to start making progress in a little corner of KwaZulu-Natal.
The question then becomes, do people have an appetite for that kind of information? I imagine you guys did your research before you put the book together. Is there some sort of indication that people are looking to read these kind of books?
I think people are looking for a good story, and together with the team at Pan Macmillan, as well as the people who helped to put the book together, I think there's an appetite for good news. There's an appetite for hope. There's an appetite for practical steps that we can take. We always, especially during election periods, and maybe it's good that the book has come out now as well. We hear during election periods all sorts of manifestos and plans and speeches and all sorts of things out there. But what does that translate to? Once you've actually won, or once you've taken over government, what does that translate to? How do you take all this rhetoric? How do you take these glossy manifestos and actually turn it into something that people can tangibly and realistically see in front of them? So yes, I think the need, the desire in South Africa is practical steps to fix, to save, to rescue, whatever word you want to use, our communities.
Okay, let's get straight into the book. I'm hoping people will go out and get a copy of it, but without giving away too much. Your book kind of chronicles what you've done since you got into office in 2021. And there's been a lot of upheaval, which we'll get into a little bit later. But let's talk about some of the practical steps that you just brought up, Chris. What do those practical steps look like?
I think first thing is we had to implement a manifesto. So when we didn't go out to people and say vote for us because we think we're great. We said to people, this is our offer. Mm-hmm. And I think the first thing we did is we called in the managers, the senior managers, and we said, and in fact, weirdly enough, they said, what are our marching orders? And we said, no, we don't work like that, but this is what we want to implement. And so we have 5 very basic goals that we want to get to at the end of the day. But there was a lot of cleaning out that we need to do. But also at the same time, whilst you're trying to clean out the institution, you have to be cognizant of the fact that the institution still needs to work. So you could fire all your senior managers, but then you don't achieve your end goal. So we had to be really strategic about how we do that. And we had, at the time, a municipal manager who wasn't playing ball. In fact, at the time, she was suspended. So, in fact, in the book, we talk about how we had to come to a compromise to say, well, what do we do? Do we pay her out, or do we follow the legal course, which was costing us 1 million rand at the time, and her salary is just over 1 million rand. So we had to make that compromise, and eventually we sat down with her and said, listen, you don't want to be here, and you're suspended, and we don't want to drag this out, so you can go. Hoping that, you know, the SAPs and the Hawks are looking for her, so they'll find her down the line. So it's those type of decisions that you have to make. I mean, we often talk about when we came into government and everyone was complaining about the roads and how bad they were, but what is the point of building roads when we don't have the plant and equipment to maintain those? So we spent an entire financial year where we didn't, you know, so there's something called the Municipal Infrastructure Grant.
Right.
And that's really just to build halls and roads and whatever infrastructure that we deem necessary. So we took all that money and said, no, let us buy excavators, let us buy low beds, let us buy trucks, so that, you know, when we build the roads, if we can be able to maintain them after that. So it's also balancing people's expectations. So, you know, I think the first chapter, it says that uMngeni municipality is a typical municipality. You've got your affluent areas, you've got township areas, you've got rural areas, and every single person wants something from the institution. So
There's not a one-size-fits-all solution to it, yeah.
I think, you know, there's no one-size-fits-all solution to fixing local government. But I do think that there are things that you can replicate, whether they are principles, techniques, procedures. There are things that are universal to all municipalities, and I think that's what part of the book tries to identify. And like Sandile said at the beginning, is that we're not experts at what we're doing. You know, you can't go study to be a mayor or a deputy mayor.
Right.
But, you know, we have got someone with a master's in politics and someone with an honours degree in town planning, and we're trying to utilize not only our practical skills from our studies, but you know, trying to utilize what's out there to make this process a lot quicker than, you know, the healing, if you want to call it that, of the municipality a lot quicker. But, you know, you talk about the plant and the equipment and all of those sorts of things. What the book also does is talks about what needs to happen within inside the business of government. So we can fix the potholes and you can fix the street lights. Those things are relatively easy to do. But if you haven't got money, or you haven't got the skills, or you haven't got the standard operating procedures, or your supply chain management department doesn't work, what do you do to try and fix those? Right. So like with any business, you know, your internal mechanisms have to work to be able to achieve that. So the book outlines some of the things that we found and how we've managed to navigate through that, finding savings in certain places, cancelling contracts, the fight back that we receive from some of the contractors who've been overpricing things, the cadre deployment inside. You know, this is a dedicated system of HR manipulation that, you know, we talk about it out there and we hear it on the radio and we watch it on TV or whatever it might be. But what does cadre deployment look like on the inside of a municipality, and how do you try and undo this that destructive system? Again, you know, we outline some of the people and processes that we managed to target. There's a target's probably the wrong word, but intervene. So yeah, that's there's a name and shame section where we provide some of the names of the people who have, you know, they've, through their actions or inactions, have caused the harm to the community, caused harm to this institution that is supposed to deliver for the people. And
I'll commend you for that, because truth be told, some of these people need to be named and shamed. And I believe I'm not the only person who feels like there should actually be real consequences for maladministration of funds, just bad governance. I think way too often in this country do we hear about wrongdoing and then not see any follow-up in that regard. I guess that would be my next question then. What are your thoughts on the judicial system in this country, specifically when it comes to politicians? Because there's a lot of people in this country that believe that the political class of this country are untouchable, above the law, that kind of stuff. I mean, we've watched state capture commissions. We've seen reports coming from Chapter 9 institutions in this country, and it seems as if a lot of the things that are brought to the fore are just pushed away.
No, I definitely agree with your sentiments. I think you're 100% correct in what you're saying. And obviously we experienced that as well, but also institutionally we didn't have any consequence management systems. So we had to come and literally rebuild the capacity. So what is a chief audit executive? We didn't have someone to look into our books internally.
Legal advisor.
Legal advisor is something we didn't have. What is risk committee, audit committee,
Municipal Public Accounts Committee,
Municipal Financial Disciplinary Board. And we've asked them to look into a number of issues. So we really had to capacitate the institution inside to be able to deal with that type of thing. But as you say, I completely agree with you. People outside of being fired or being dealt with internally, people walk away scot-free. And I use the case of Tembele Tsiban, the former municipal manager, who was fingered in the SIU report as being the playmaker in all of what was going on in terms of COVID-19 funding. But she's now redeployed in Mangaung. So, she was kicked out of uMngeni for, doing financial maladministration, corruption, and fraud, and they redeployed her elsewhere, and that's where she is serving currently. So,
one thing that people must understand is that consequence management accountability is expensive. We know the figure of 1 billion rand for the Zondo Commission that you just mentioned now.
Yeah.
Now you can imagine these small municipalities across the country who have, whether it is, I think it was Andre de Ruyter that spoke about like the mafia inside of Eskom, and it exists everywhere in government. State capture report, the Zondo Commission is a drop in the ocean. If you want to go and look at real corruption, go look at local government, from your metros to your smallest municipalities. But these things cost money. So you've got to make and we'd have to decide: do we build roads? Are you delivering water? Are you buying police vehicles, whatever it might be, or do you spend endless millions of rands pursuing criminals and trying to prove them? And the law really in this country does protect criminals. It is so hard to convict someone of things that are really obvious. You can see the harm that they've done, but the law protects criminals in this country, and it's very expensive. So for a small municipality like ours, and we sort of identified in the book, you need to find strategies around these expensive forensic cases and legal cases and endless court battles. But there are ways around and through those sorts of issues that helps to clean up government.
It sounds like a tall order. It sounds like you guys are pretty much up against it. You've got a lot of structural things that you're going to have to deal with. Speaking, as you said, it's quite expensive to try hunt down these criminals and people that have been fingered in multiple reports or been shown to have some level of wrongdoing. What do you say then to someone who's watching this interview or listening to it, and they believe, look, man, if it's such a uphill battle to bring these people to face the long arm of the law, why should anyone else follow the law? Because when someone hears something like that, in their mind, it's like, okay, we might as well live in anarchy, because if the top brass aren't being put behind bars, I might as well take my chances as well on the street.
It's already happening, so it's not a hypothetical question. It's whether we're talking about water tanker mafias, construction mafia, whether we talk about big private hospitals who disconnect themselves from electricity and consume electricity illegally, whether it is something as basic as abiding by the traffic laws. How did you get to this morning?
Well, I use public transport.
All right, and that public transport, did they follow the speed limit?
No.
Exactly. So wherever you go, I drove to work yesterday, and it's become this habit that it says 40 but you drive 60, and it's just this habitual thing. So lawlessness and then leads to sort of criminal acts. It's something that needs to be dealt with in society as a whole. In South Africa, there's impunity around respect for the rule of law, and those are the foundational principles that we agree to live by. Those are the things that we say, okay, you can be rich or poor, young or old, whatever it might be, but this is what we say. This is, everyone agrees to this, and there's consequences.
Now that sounds like it's a cultural problem. Like South Africa's got a culture of lawlessness. Like if it comes down to following the speed limit and whatnot, how do we go about bringing that change? How do we go about incentivizing South Africans to actually follow the law, or at least have some sort of reverence for the rule of law?
I think there's two things that you can do. Firstly, the rot starts from the top. So if you got your leaders who act and carry on and nothing ever happens to
I'm
them.
not sure if your laptop is on, is it?
It is
No.
not on.
It is not on. Okay.
Log it.
Yeah, well, we'll...
So while you
We'll
sort
sort
that
it
out,
out.
maybe you can open that. So I think it starts from the top. If you have people who are acting with impunity at the top, then it filters down. Your leaders are supposed to be role models. Your leaders are supposed to be people that you rely on to ethically make the decision to step down, to get arrested, to not abuse state resources. So yeah, I think you've got to start at the top. And as we speak about it towards the end of the book, we give a few principles, if you want to call them that, about what needs to take place. And the one is accountability. I'm not sure if you want to expand on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think also just being able to hold yourselves accountable. And I think the easiest way, you touched on impact a bit earlier, Chris. So the Municipal Public Accounts Committee is something that's always been there, but it never sat. So you've got a committee that is by law. Now it's actually by law. Each municipality must have one of those. But if it doesn't sit and go through things, then it just doesn't work. Chris has appeared before the Impact Committee before as the mayor of uMngeni municipality, and he happily handed himself over, and he accounted on, I think it was...
You make it sound like I was arrested. I was called to a committee, handed himself over.
You had to. I mean, and then also the Rules and Ethics Committee is something that we didn't have. So there's been a number of councillors now whose salaries have been docked as a result of having been found wanting by this particular committee. So that's the type of accountability that we talk about. But I think also at the same time, our police are under-resourced at times, and also the schools aren't necessarily there. And we know this because we've had to take on much, much more than what we should as a local municipality. So we spend money into a vehicle and traffic pound. We're constantly spending money into buying new vehicles, ensuring
Hiring new
that
staff.
we're getting a bigger staff complement, because we're taking on more and more and more. So what SAFs should be doing, we end up doing it. So I think there's another issue there, is to say that our police force needs to be capacitated, and we need to get the right people in there.
So, speaking of policing, KZN is a very, I want to say, volatile space to work in. There have been multiple political killings. There's been, in fact, in 2021, the uprisings that happened in this country, kind of KZN was the epicenter for. How do you plan to navigate that space? Or at least how have you come to navigate that space since 2021? Because I can imagine there's a lot of different forces pulling in different directions, having to appease certain groups, or how I'm just trying to figure out how you guys are going to go about settling the dust in KZN, because a lot is up in the air.
I think we've learned from firsthand. So we lost one of our own in December, and really what Lawlessness was doing was he was really just doing his job. So it's a really difficult thing to navigate. And Chris, you speak a lot about it, about what's wrong with our police force, what needs to happen. But it's just so entrenched in KZN politics. You disagree with Chris, instead of me disagreeing and having a conversation about it, I take him out. And it was when Lawlessness was shot, it was a really scary time. We weren't sure of our own safety and what was going to happen next. So yeah, it's one of those difficult things that we have to go through. I mean, he's a bit naughty, but we both have protectors, and we both don't like people following us around, and he still drives around on his own. But it's, yeah. But I think you can talk a bit more about that particular, around Lawlessness' death and how the police have acted, and what actually needs to be done.
So there's a chapter in the book that speaks to, it's called Lawlessness has been shot. And that was the WhatsApp message that we got. It was a normal evening, and we were all sitting at home, and around 6 o'clock in the evening, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening, there was a message on a WhatsApp group from one of our councillors that said Lawlessness has been shot, just like that. And of course, you know, we were all sitting there, so it was all the DA councillors, and it was a DA WhatsApp group for all the councillors. And now you start to have to react. And I think, you know, you always hear about it. You always hear about an IFP councillor has been shot, or an ANC, or Nkosi in Nduna has been shot. But now this was one of our people. This was the first time in history that a DA councillor had been assassinated, targeted, not you know, accidental drive-by or caught up in some gang violence. This was
they were the intended target.
And the book goes on to explain, you know, how we reacted, what we did, you know, what the police, you know, the latest developments, because it's still fairly recent. But I think generally, you have to understand the environment that you are working in. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it right that people are being killed. It doesn't make it right that you know, people have to live with bodyguards and things like that. But there's a reality in KZN that people are dying. There's something like 146 councillors that have been murdered since 2018, if I remember correctly.
Something along those lines, yeah.
It's like some ridiculous number, and that's the life that we live. So, you know, and all of these things add when you cancel a contract because it's overpriced. This impacts on your safety, and again in the book it outlines some of those sorts of things. Getting used to having protection, you know, having to be whisked out of venues because suddenly crime intelligence has raised something with you, and there's a number of those scenarios that we outlined. But these aren't stories; these are like things that happen to us every day. I mean, if I can use the most recent one, it's not in the book, but it just shows how it's ongoing. Is that a week and a half ago, I was at an election debate, and I was debating on stage. It was myself and the EFF representative and the MK representative and the ANC and the IFP. And as the debate finished, the police rushed into the venue and blocked off the stage. And they whisked myself and Tami Ntuli, the IFP chairperson, out of the venue. And we just follow instruction. When the police say move, you move.
Right. So,
and then we found out that there was crime intelligence and got information that we were targets that evening. And this is like an ongoing basis. And, you know, I don't want to say you become numb to it, but that's the reality. You can't let it sit in your mind.
Which then makes me think that you guys have to have some, I won't say special, but you guys have a temperament that not too many people have. I don't see too many people standing up to take part in anything close to political for that specific fear, because it seems these days a life is not that expensive at all. And what I've also noticed,
120,000 rand.
20,000 rand.
120,000 rand gets you a hit on a low-level councillor in rural KZN.
120,000 rand. And it's what scares me as well is the fact that there's a lot of these killings happening not just in politics, but even in music and entertainment. So it's not just limited to the realm of politics, which kind of feeds into the idea that we are living in a rather crime-laden country.
17%.
Yeah.
17% of all murders lead to a conviction in this country.
That is a shockingly low number. Very, very low.
17% of people see justice. And there's various reasons for that, but I mean, that's a different discussion. But yeah, I think the point that Sandile was making is that you end up as local government taking on much more responsibility than what is actually within your mandate. And we provide that in the book to say, well, this is what we're actually supposed to be doing as a local government, and these are the things that we're expected to do. Because when the post office can no longer pay for its rates and its electricity because at a national level it's gone bankrupt, and the lady comes into your office, the manager is crying in your office to say, well, you just disconnected us. You know, we've then take on that responsibility as a municipality to pay their bills for them, because if we don't, then your kokos and mkhulus can no longer earn their grants.
Right.
So yeah, and there's a number of those things. Police, they outlined in the book to say, well, you know, should we be giving more power to local government? And I think that's something that you're passionate about.
So you believe in a more decentralized way of governing?
Definitely, especially when it comes to policing. I think that local governments understand better what needs to be done to protect their own citizens. There's various and different dynamics. So I look at our municipality as well. You've got a huge agricultural sector. If you cannot get a rural policing unit in there, that will assist them greatly. So I think it should be left up to local governments to decide what they think works best when it comes to policing. So we've, like Chris says, we've tried to do a lot of it, but obviously legislation doesn't allow us to do all of it. But luckily for us, SAPS seems to enjoy the help that we give them. I know in other municipalities it's not so easy, and people tell you that you're overstepping. But I think with us, our SAPs recognize that they're under-resourced and they can't do what they're supposed to be doing. So they rely on us heavily, and both Chris and I go on many patrols late into the night with the various neighborhood watches. So in that sense as well, we do put our money where our mouth is. We don't go say this needs to be done. We go there, we patrol with the guys, we understand what they're going through. And
Sandile's personal favorite is the multidisciplinary
interventions. Oh, I love those.
When
walking around
home
and checking
affairs
compliance.
and immigration, and everyone comes along. But I think one of the other things, and it's something that I think you're doing your PhD partly on this, and also from the Western Cape issues, and my master's as well. I'm sort of segueing that way, but is what needs to change about local government, because it's not possible, for example, a Nongoma, which is a very rural municipality that has a tax base of about 5%. 5% of the people can pay taxes there, but yet the government is expected to deliver to 100% of the people. So how do you see rapid development in underdeveloped areas or rural areas when the model and the system of governance does not allow us to do so? So Sandile unpacks this in the book. He talks about some of the issues that, some of the things that we can do to rework the system of local government to try and make it more financially sustainable so that we can deliver services to different communities.
Sounds good. So I'm going to ask you, gentlemen, to look into your crystal balls, if you can, for a second. As we all know, we're going to the polls on the 29th of May. That's, 2 weeks from now? 2 or 3?
days.
22 days, yeah.
22 days, yeah.
Thank goodness.
Whenever we have political leaders and all of that stuff in the studio, we always get the, I guess, politically correct response to this question. What are your predictions for this year's elections, from local government even to national?
So maybe I'll from a provincial perspective, because we do come from KZN. So I think our country is maturing. Democracy is maturing, first of all. So we have a multi-party democracy, which means that many people can contest, which is people's right. So you're going to have coalition governments in many places across our country and in our province as well. And people mustn't be scared of that. That is the system in which we exist. So I think in KZN in particular, you're going to have 4 political parties between 18 and 30%, or 20 and 30%. And that will be mainly the MK Party, DA, IFP, and ANC. You'll have the EFF somewhere below 10%, between 5 and 10%, and then the rest of the smaller parties making up 8 to 10% of the vote. And that'll be 5 or 6 different parties. So you're going to have a situation where the second biggest province and the second biggest economy in our country has a coalition government that looks very different to what it currently has. And you're going to have the same thing in Gauteng. And you're going to have the same thing at a national level. You're going to have the governing party at the moment dropping below 50%. And everyone's got predictions about where, but I think they'll end up somewhere between 40 and 45, which then changes what government looks like. But I think the point is that people mustn't be scared of this. Change is something that's happened often in South Africa, whether it was 1994, whether it was, the city of Cape Town changing from ANC to DA, the Western Cape changing, whether it's in KwaZulu-Natal where municipalities went from the ANC to the IFP. Governments have changed hands, so people mustn't be nervous about this. And this book is about that, is to say that government changed hands, and a new government that looks completely different, that sounds completely different, that has different policies came into power and has systematically been implementing their policies, their vision, their program of action. And these are the results. These are the lessons that we've learned. So I think that's an important taking from this book, is that if you're unhappy with the situation now, then there are alternatives, and this is what it looks like when you're there. These are the nuts and bolts of trying to fix things. It's not just about speeches and glossy manifestos.
Sandile, anything to add on that?
What do we normally say in council? I think I'm covered.
You're covered.
I'm covered.
Well,
No,
gentlemen,
Covered butt.
covered. Oh yes, sometimes there's a but not
Covered
now.
but I want
I
to
think
add.
I think you've covered all the points that we wanted to make, and I think one province that people should really be looking at is KZN.
Mhm.
If you look at, and I always tell people this, if you look at the 4 major political parties, or before the MK, they all decided to host their manifesto launches at Moses Mabhida Stadium.
Yep.
And I think they also recognize that KZN is going to be the biggest battlefield. The top brass of the ANC now has all been deployed to KZN because they understand that's where it's going to be happening. So I think people need to keep a close eye on KZN. We could be losing Christopher to provincial government. And luckily for him, I think he's got a capable replacement.
If you do say so yourself.
I
I think we use those words in the book.
We do, well, you use it. I obviously can't say that.
Sometimes I get worried about that kind of stuff. Like when someone is doing really well as a councillor and then they're taken and put as a mayor and whatnot. I don't know about you guys, but like if it's not broken, don't fix it, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, that's also me kind of negating ambition on that individual's part. But
Well, even if you take out ambition, you want people who, if you see something doing well, if there's some progress, then surely there's something that they're doing right. Can they duplicate that? Can they do that somewhere else, whether it's in another municipality or at a different level of government? So I don't think it's something to be worried about or to be skeptical about.
Sure.
You want people who have shown success to try and duplicate that success somewhere else.
Gentlemen, I wish we could continue this conversation, but I know we are pressed for time. I just want to say one more time, thank you very much for taking the time to join me in studio for a chat. Firstly, all the best with the elections coming up this year. And I hope people actually go out and buy your book. It sounds like quite the page turner, and seemingly there's a lot to learn from you 2 young men. And I think it's also really refreshing, to see people that are under the age of 45 actually taking the bull by the horns. Because truthfully, I think we've got enough elderly people in government
with shiny
now.
shoes and big tummies.
Yeah.
You need to stop saying that because I started
They really do.
myself.
No, but
They got shiny shoes on today.
no, but at least your skin lends itself to being young.
Yeah.
So thank you. Gents, again, thank you very much. Hopefully we will do this after the elections and then we can have some reflection and see how far or close your predictions were.
Thank you
very
Thank you for having us.
Thanks. Alrighty.